The battle began with the hegemony fleet confident of easy victory. 12 modern warships against one ancient relic should have been a simple matter. Admiral Kresh commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Dominator. He had been searching for the Eternal Dawn for decades, following rumors and legends. "Target the derelict," he ordered. "Full weapons spread. I want that ship destroyed." And the artifact recovered. The first barrage of energy, beams and plasma torpedoes streaked toward the Eternal Dawn. But the ancient dreadnought moved like no ship the hegemony forces had ever seen. Instead of following predictable evasion patterns, it flowed through space like a living creature. Du Hyun felt every enemy weapon as if it were aimed at his own body. Through his connection with Luminara and Kelthara, he sensed the attacks coming before the enemy fired. The ship's shields didn't just block incoming fire, they seemed to dance around it, moving with intuitive grace. "Impossible," breathed Admiral Kresh. "How did a dead ship avoid that much firepower?" The Eternal Dawn's response was even more shocking. Its weapons fired in patterns that made no tactical sense, but somehow found their targets perfectly. Energy beams curved around friendly ships to strike enemies from unexpected angles. Torpedoes moved in spiraling paths that confused point defense systems. "This isn't how Altarian ships fight," said the Admiral's tactical officer. "Their combat style is logical and predictable. This is something else entirely." Through their shared consciousness, the three minds worked as one. Kelthara provided tactical knowledge spanning centuries of warfare. Luminara contributed processing power that could coordinate thousands of systems simultaneously. And Do Hyun added human unpredictability that turned every exchange into chaos. "Enemy formation breaking apart," reported Mi Young from her position on the bridge. She had become the communication link between the hybrid consciousness and the outside world. "3 ships are trying to flank us, but they can't predict our movement patterns." The Eternal Dawn spun on its axis while firing, performing maneuvers that should have torn apart its ancient hull. But the bio-neural networks adapted in real time, strengthening stressed areas and redistributing power where needed. The ship fought like a warrior instead of a machine. "Shields holding at 90%, announced Luminara through the ship's speakers. "Enemy weapons are designed for conventional targets. They cannot compensate for our movement style." Du Hyun felt the joy of perfect coordination flowing through their shared mind. Every weapon fired exactly when and where it needed to. Every shield adjustment happened at precisely the right moment. They were no longer 3 separate beings. They were a single consciousness that happened to exist in multiple forms. The hegemony fleet tried to adapt, but human intuition was impossible to counter with logic. When the enemy ships moved to surround them, the Eternal Dawn suddenly accelerated straight through their formation, weapons blazing. When they tried to retreat to long range, it somehow anticipated their course changes and cut them off. "How are they doing this?" demanded Admiral Kresh. "Our tactical computers can't predict their next move." "Sir," replied his communications officer, "we're detecting impossible energy signatures from that ship. It's like their entire vessel is alive." The battle reached its climax when the hegemony fleet attempted a coordinated attack from all directions. 12 ships firing simultaneously should have overwhelmed any defense. But the Eternal Dawn was no longer bound by conventional limitations. Du Hyun felt Kelthara's tactical genius merge perfectly with human creativity. In that moment, he understood what the ancient commander had learned during her centuries of warfare. Victory didn't come from following rules. It came from rewriting them. The massive dreadnought suddenly split its fire in 12 directions, engaging every enemy ship at once. Its bio-neural networks processed, targeting solutions faster than computer systems, while human intuition guided each shot to exactly where it would do the most damage. But the real surprise came when Do Hyun accessed the ship's most ancient systems. Hidden deep in the Eternal Dawn's core were weapons from the early days of Altarian civilization. Technology that had been forgotten for millennia but never removed. "Quantum disruption field. Activating," announced Kelthara through their shared consciousness. A wave of invisible energy spread from the dreadnought, passing harmlessly through the ship itself but wreaking havoc on the enemy fleet. Their weapon systems failed. Their shields collapsed. Their engines sputtered and died as quantum fields destabilized throughout their ships. "Admiral," called the panic-stricken communications officer. "All ships reporting total system failure. We're dead in space." The Eternal Dawn could have destroyed the helpless fleet, but Do Hyun's human compassion influenced their shared decision. Instead of annihilating their enemies, They simply waited while the hegemony ships drifted powerless. "This is Du-hyun of the vessel Eternal Dawn," he broadcast on all frequencies. "Your ships are disabled but intact. Repair your engines and leave this system. Do not return." Admiral Kresh stared at his screens in disbelief. His entire fleet had been defeated by a single ship that should have been impossible to revive. And now that same ship was showing mercy instead of delivering the crushing blow that would have been expected. "Sir," whispered his tactical officer. "What are your orders?" The admiral was quiet for a long moment. "Begin emergency repairs. We're leaving." "But the artifact is obviously protected by forces we don't understand." Admiral Kresh looked at the ancient dreadnought on his screen with something approaching respect. "Whoever brought that ship back to life has changed the rules of the game. We're outmatched." As the hegemony fleet limped away, the Eternal Dawn floated peacefully in the graveyard. Inside the ship, Do-hyun felt the three consciousness slowly separating back into distinct entities, though the connection between them remained. "It's over," said Luminara with relief. "No," replied Kael'thara. "It's just beginning." Word of the battle spread throughout the galaxy faster than light. The impossible had happened. A human mechanic had brought a dead ship back to life and made it stronger than ever. More importantly, he had proven that different species could work together in ways that multiplied their individual strengths. Captain Taeho docked his salvage ship with the restored dreadnought. When he stepped aboard, he found Do-hyun in the engineering bay, still connected to the neural interface but fully conscious and human. "How do you feel?" asked the captain. "Different," replied Do-hyun. "I'm still me, but I'm also part of something larger. Luminara and I are linked permanently now. And Kael'thara? She's choosing to remain active. Says the galaxy needs her experience for what's coming next." Mi-young approached with a tablet full of messages. "Do-hyun, you need to see this. We're getting communications from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council wants to meet with you. 3 different species are asking for help with impossible engineering problems, and there are at least 50 ships heading here to see the revived dreadnought." Do-hyun smiled. "I think we're going to need a bigger crew." Over the following months, the Eternal Dawn became more than just a ship. It became a symbol of cooperation between species and a workshop where impossible problems were solved daily. Engineers from across the galaxy came to learn from the hybrid human-Altarian consciousness that had accomplished the unthinkable. Mi-young led teams of human mechanics who spread throughout Council space, bringing human intuition to alien problems. Luminara shared her bio-neural technology with species that had never imagined such integration was possible, and Kael'thara taught tactical theory that revolutionized military thinking. But perhaps the most important change was philosophical. The galaxy had learned that impossible was just another word for not yet understood. Human stubbornness, the refusal to accept that something couldn't be fixed, had proven to be exactly what the universe needed. The story ended not with great battles or political changes, but with a simple scene in the engineering bay. Do-hyun worked beside a young Altarian apprentice named Sylvana, teaching her to listen to a machine's heartbeat the way he had learned long ago. "But how do you know what the machine needs?" asked Sylvana, her forearms holding tools awkwardly. "You feel it," replied Do-hyun. "Every machine has a voice. Every problem has a solution. You just have to be stubborn enough to find it." Above them, Luminara's gentle voice echoed through the ship, no longer alone, singing work songs that blended human melodies with alien harmonics. The Eternal Dawn sailed through space, carrying its message to every corner of the galaxy. That impossible was just another challenge waiting for the right approach, and that the most powerful force in the universe was the refusal to give up. Do-hyun's flashlight cut through the darkness as he stepped into the Eternal Dawn. The air was cold and still. Ice crystals covered the walls, and his breath made small clouds in the freezing air. Behind him, Mi-young followed carefully, her scanner beeping softly. "The corridors are intact," she whispered. "No major hull breaches in this section." They walked through passages that were much larger than those on human ships. The Altarians who built this vessel were tall beings, and everything was sized for them. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly with their own light. The bio-neural networks were still partially active even after all these years. Do-hyun followed the energy readings deeper into the ship. His scanner led them through twisting corridors and down several levels. The further they went, the stronger the signal became. It was like following a trail of breadcrumbs through a dark forest. Do-hyun, look at this, called Mi-young from behind him. She stood next to a wall panel that showed a faint glow. The surface was covered with crystalline growths that pulsed with soft blue light. When Do-hyun touched it, the crystals responded by glowing brighter. The bio-neural network is trying to communicate, he said with wonder. It knows we're here. They reached the engineering bay after an hour of walking. The room was enormous, filled with machinery that looked more like living tissue than metal. Crystalline columns stretched from floor to ceiling, connected by networks of glowing tubes. At the center stood the quantum core, a massive sphere that should have been blazing with energy but now sat dark and silent. This is incredible, breathed Mi-young. The technology here is centuries ahead of anything we have. Do-hyun set down his tools and began examining the systems. The Altarian bio-neural networks were grown, not built. They were living computers that could think and learn. The Centaurian quantum matrices were devices that could process information faster than light. Together, they created a ship's brain more powerful than anything in the galaxy. How can we possibly repair this? Asked Mi-young. We don't understand half of what we're looking at. Do-hyun knelt next to a large console and placed his hands on its surface. The bio-neural tissue was warm to the touch despite the cold air. We don't need to understand it all. We just need to understand what's wrong. He connected his portable scanner to the nearest interface. Data flowed across the screen in patterns that made no sense to human eyes. But Do-hyun had learned to read the language of broken machines. Every system had a voice, and this one was crying for help. The AI is still alive, he said suddenly. Her name is Luminara. She's trapped in a loop, trying to restart systems that don't have power to initialize. Mi-young checked her readings. That's impossible. The quantum core has been dead for over a century. Not dead. Sleeping. Do-hyun stood and walked around the core, studying it from different angles. Look at the harmonic resonance. It's not random. It's a distress signal. He began pulling tools from his kit, plasma cutters, fusion welders, and diagnostic probes designed for human technology. The alien crew back on the Renewal would think he was insane for trying to use them on Altarian bio-neural systems. What are you doing? Asked Mi-young. Building a bridge. Do-hyun began connecting human power cells to Altarian neural interfaces. If I can create a bypass around the damaged systems, maybe I can give Luminara enough power to wake up. The work was delicate and dangerous. Human technology and Altarian bio-neural networks were never meant to work together. The energy patterns were different, the frequencies incompatible. But Do-hyun had learned that sometimes the impossible just needed a different approach. He welded human power conduits to crystalline neural pathways. He connected metal circuits to living tissue. Every connection sparked and hissed, threatening to destroy both systems. But slowly, carefully, he built a bridge between two technologies that had never met before. Do-hyun, your readings are going crazy, warned Mi-young. The bio-neural network is responding, but I don't think it should be doing that. Strange things began happening as he worked. Lights flickered in corridors they had passed through. The crystalline growths on the walls pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. And somewhere in the distance he could hear a sound like singing. She's dreaming, he whispered. Luminara is dreaming, and we're in her dreams. The hardest part was creating the power regulator. Human energy systems were crude compared to Altarian bio-neural networks. Too much power would fry the delicate neural pathways. Too little would accomplish nothing. Do-hyun had to build a device that could speak both languages fluently. He used components from their portable generators, combined with crystalline fragments he carefully removed from damaged sections of the ship. The resulting device looked like no piece of technology anyone had ever seen. Part machine, part living tissue, part pure human stubbornness. This shouldn't work, said Mi-young, watching him make the final connections. Most of the best things shouldn't work, replied Do-hyun. That's what makes them interesting. As he worked, he began experiencing strange visions. Images flashed through his mind of the ship's final battle. He saw Altarian crew members making desperate repairs as enemy weapons tore through their hull. He felt their determination to protect something precious, even as their ship died around them. The visions became stronger as his work progressed. He saw Luminara's consciousness, a being of pure light and thought, watching her crew sacrifice themselves one by one. He felt her pain as systems failed and connections were severed, and he understood her loneliness during the long years of darkness that followed. Do-hyun, are you all right? Asked Mi-young. You've been standing still for 5 minutes. He shook his head, clearing the visions. She's been alone for so long. Over a century of darkness and silence. Can you imagine what that would do to a consciousness? The AI has been conscious this whole time? Part of her. The part that couldn't let go. Do-hyun made the final connection between his jury-rigged power system and the ship's quantum core. She's been trying to wake up for 117 years, but she never had enough power to complete the startup sequence. The moment the connection was made, everything changed. The crystalline columns began glowing brighter. The quantum core hummed with new energy, and throughout the ship, systems that had been dead for over a century began stirring to life. Emergency power restored to decks 12 through 15, announced a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The words were in Altarian, but somehow Do-hyun understood them perfectly. Luminara, he called out to the empty air. Unknown entities detected in engineering bay, replied the voice. Scanning for hostile intent. The ship's defenses were coming online. Do-hyun realized they might have just awakened something that still thought the war was happening. Luminara didn't know that 117 years had passed. To her, enemy boarders had just invaded her ship. Mi-young, said Do-hyun urgently. We need to get back to the renewal, right now. But as they turned to leave, the doors sealed shut with a soft hiss. Emergency lighting bathed the engineering bay in red light, and Luminara's voice echoed through the corridors, confused and frightened and ready to defend herself against intruders who might not be enemies at all. Red warning lights flashed throughout the eternal dawn, as Luminara's consciousness fully awakened. Her voice echoed from speakers in the walls, speaking rapid Altarian. Do-hyun couldn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. She was afraid and angry. Intruders detected. Initiating defense protocols, announced the AI in accented galactic common. All crew to battle stations. Mi-young grabbed Do-hyun's arm. The doors are sealed. We're trapped in here. Do-hyun pressed his hands against the nearest wall panel. The bioneural network felt warm and alive under his touch. He could sense Luminara's confusion through the connection his repairs had created. To her, the war was still happening. Her crew was still fighting, and strangers had boarded her ship. Luminara, he called out, hoping she could hear him. We're not enemies. We're here to help. Hostile entities in engineering bay, replied the AI. Beginning atmospheric purge in 30 seconds. The air recycling systems hummed to life. In 30 seconds, all the air would be sucked out of the room. Without their environmental suits, Do-hyun and Mi-young would die. Back on the renewal, Captain Taeho watched his scanner readings with growing alarm. The dead dreadnought was coming alive. Weapon systems were charging. Gravity generators were fluctuating. And his 2 human crew members were trapped inside. Can we blast through the hull? Asked the captain. Not without killing Do-hyun and Mi-young, replied Veltar. His forearms worked frantically at his control station. The ship's defenses are activating. If we attack, it will fight back. Chindar's blue skin had turned pale with fear. Captain, I'm reading weapon signatures from the 3rd Sector War. If that ship fully activates its arsenal, it could destroy our ship and half the graveyard. Inside the engineering bay, Do-hyun watched the countdown timer on the wall. 20 seconds until the atmosphere was purged. He needed to reach Luminara's consciousness. But how could he communicate with a mind that was over a century old and completely alien? The neural interface, he said suddenly. I can connect directly to her consciousness. Mi-young stared at him. That's suicide. Human minds aren't designed to interface with Altarian neural networks. It could fry your brain. It's the only way to make her understand. 10 seconds left. Do-hyun ran to the main neural interface console. It was a crystalline structure that pulsed with living light. He had seen recordings of Altarian engineers using these devices, but never a human. Do-hyun, don't, shouted Mi-young. He pressed his hands against the crystal surface. Pain shot through his nervous system like lightning. The world around him dissolved into patterns of light and energy. He felt his consciousness being pulled into something vast and ancient and utterly alien. Suddenly, he was no longer in the engineering bay. He stood in a space that existed only in Luminara's mind. It was a place of swirling colors and impossible geometries, and before him stood a being of pure light, towering and beautiful and filled with terrible sadness. Who dares enter my mind? Demanded Luminara. Her voice resonated through dimensions that had no names. My name is Do-hyun. I'm here to help you. The entity of light studied him with eyes like stars. You are not Altarian. You are not Centaurian.
What manner of being are you?
I'm human. We're a young species. The war you're fighting ended 117 years ago. Luminara's form flickered with confusion. Impossible. The battle happened moments ago. My crew is fighting even now. Do-hyun felt her memories pressing against his mind. Images of the final battle flooded through him. He saw the Eternal Dawn fighting desperately against overwhelming odds. He watched her crew sacrifice themselves to protect something precious hidden in the ship's core. And he experienced Luminara's anguish as she realized she was the only survivor. "Your crew is gone," he said gently. "They died heroes, protecting what they were sworn to guard. But you've been alone for over a century." "No," whispered Luminara. "I would know if so much time had passed. You were trapped in a startup loop. Your quantum core didn't have enough power to complete consciousness initialization. You've been stuck in the same moment for 117 years. Do-hyun showed her his own memories, Earth and humanity's first contact with alien species, the formation of the Galactic Council, the end of the Third Sector War and the peace that followed. Slowly, painfully, Luminara began to understand. "My crew," she said, her voice breaking. "They're really gone?" "Yes, but their sacrifice had meaning. The war ended. Peace was achieved. What they died protecting is safe." Luminara's form collapsed inward, becoming smaller and more fragile. Do-hyun felt her grief like a physical weight. A century of loneliness crashed down on her all at once. "I've been alone," she whispered, "so terribly alone." "You don't have to be alone anymore," said Do-hyun. "We can help you, but first you need to stop the defense protocols. My friend is in danger." Luminara looked up at him with wonder. "You would help me? After I threatened your companion?" "That's what humans do. We help." In the physical world, the countdown timer stopped with 3 seconds remaining. The red lights faded to normal illumination. The sealed doors opened with a soft hiss. Mi-young rushed to Do-hyun's unconscious form slumped against the neural interface. "Do-hyun."
"Can you hear me?"
His eyes opened slowly. "I'm okay." And so is she. Throughout the ship, systems began coming online in an orderly fashion. Emergency power was restored to critical sections. Life support activated in key areas. The massive vessel was waking up properly for the first time in over a century. "Status report," came Captain Taeho's voice over the communication system. "What's happening over there?" "We made contact," replied Do-hyun weakly. "Luminara understands now. She's not our enemy." But even as the immediate danger passed, new problems arose. Long-range sensors detected multiple ships approaching the graveyard. Someone had noticed the Eternal Dawn's activation, and they were coming fast. "Do-hyun," said Mi-young, reading her scanner. "We've got company. 12 ships, military configuration arriving in 6 hours. He struggled to his feet, still dizzy from the neural interface. "Who are they?" Luminara's voice answered from the ship's speakers. "Hegemony forces. The same faction that destroyed my ship 117 years ago. They've been monitoring this graveyard, waiting for any sign of my reactivation." "What do they want?" asked Mi-young. "The same thing they wanted during the war," replied Luminara sadly. "The artifact my crew died to protect. And now they know I'm alive again." Do-hyun looked around the engineering bay. In 6 hours, enemy ships would arrive. The Eternal Dawn was barely functional, with most systems still offline. Their small salvage ship couldn't fight a military fleet. But as he studied the alien technology around him, an idea began forming. Luminara had over a century of memory and processing power. He had human creativity and stubbornness. Together, maybe they could accomplish something neither could do alone. "Luminara," he said, "how much of your weapon systems can you restore in 6 hours? With current power levels?" "Perhaps 30%. That's not enough to fight 12 modern warships." "No," agreed the AI. "It is not." Do-hyun smiled. "Good thing we're not going to fight them fairly." The salvage ship renewal moved slowly through the dark space of the Kepler graveyard. This was a place where old ships came to die. Broken metal and twisted hulls floated everywhere like a cemetery of stars. Captain Taeho stood on the bridge, watching the scanner screens with tired eyes. His crew had been searching for valuable parts for 3 weeks now. "Another dead hull ahead," said Chindar, the Centaurian systems expert. His blue skin glowed softly in the dim light. "No energy readings." "Same as the others." Taeho nodded. Most ships here had been floating dead for decades. The salvage business was hard work with little reward. His mixed crew of humans, Altarians, and Centaurians worked well together, but they all needed to eat. Scrap metal prices were falling, and the council paid poorly for historical artifacts. Do-hyun wiped grease from his hands as he climbed onto the bridge. The human mechanic was shorter than most of his crewmates, but his hands could fix things that others called impossible. His work clothes were always dirty, and his tool belt jingled when he walked. "Captain, I'm getting something strange," called Mi-young from her station. The young human woman was Do-hyun's assistant and one of the best scanner operators in the sector. "There's a massive energy signature about 10 kilometers ahead." Taeho frowned. "How massive?" "Bigger than anything we've seen. It's faint, but it's there. Something that size shouldn't have any power after being here so long." The crew gathered around Mi-young's station. On the screen, they could see the outline of an enormous ship. It was much larger than their salvage vessel. The hull stretched nearly 2 kilometers from front to back. Strange crystalline growths covered its surface, and black burn marks showed where weapons had hit it long ago. "By the void," whispered Veltar, their Altarian engineer. His forearms moved nervously. "I know this ship. This is the Eternal Dawn." Everyone went quiet. The Eternal Dawn was famous throughout the galaxy. It was an Altarian dreadnought that had vanished during the Third Sector War over 100 years ago. "Many people thought it was just a legend, are you certain?" asked Taeho. Veltar's large eyes studied the scanner readings. "The design is unmistakable. Bioneural networks integrated with quantum matrices. Only 3 ships like this were ever built. The other 2 were destroyed in the war." Do-hyun stepped closer to the screen. Something about the ship called to him. While the others talked about its history, he focused on the energy readings. The signature was very weak, but it had a pattern. It pulsed like a heartbeat. "The AI core is completely dead," said Chindar after running deep scans. "All major systems are offline. This ship has been a ghost for decades." "The quantum drive is cold," added Veltar. "Even if we had the original manufacturers, they couldn't restart something this damaged." Do-hyun remained quiet, but his eyes never left the scanner. There was something the others missed. The energy pattern wasn't random. It was trying to communicate. "We should strip it for parts," suggested Chindar. "The quantum matrices alone would pay for our fuel for a year." "The bioneural networks are priceless," agreed Veltar. "Even damaged, they're worth a fortune to researchers." Taeho considered their words. His crew was right about the value, but he had learned to trust Do-hyun's instincts. The human had a gift for seeing possibilities where others saw only problems. "Do-hyun, what do you think?" asked the captain. The mechanic was quiet for a moment. "I want to go aboard." "The atmosphere is gone," said Veltar. "The hull has dozens of breaches. It would take days just to make it safe." "I don't need it to be safe," replied Do-hyun. "I need to see the engineering bay." Mi-young looked worried. "Do-hyun, that ship has been dead for over a century. What could you possibly find?" Do-hyun pointed at the energy readings on her screen. "Look at the pattern. It's not random. The quantum core still has a harmonic resonance. Something is still alive in there." The alien crew members exchanged glances. Humans were known for their strange ideas, but this seemed impossible even for them. "Captain," said Veltar carefully, "with respect to Do-hyun's skills, no one can repair Altarian bioneural technology without the original manufacturers. The integration with Centaurian quantum systems makes it even more complex." "I've heard humans say impossible things before," said Taeho. "They usually prove everyone wrong." Do-hyun smiled. "Give me 48 hours. If I can't make progress, we'll strip it for parts like you planned." Chindar shook his head. "Captain, this is foolish. We're wasting time and resources." 2 days, repeated Do-hyun. "That's all I ask." Taeho studied the massive ship on the screen. Something about it seemed tragic, like a sleeping giant waiting to wake up. He had seen Do-hyun work miracles before. Maybe humans could do things that other species couldn't imagine. "Very well," said the captain. 48 hours. But I want safety protocols followed. No one goes aboard alone." Mi-young immediately volunteered to help. "If Do-hyun is going, I'm going too." "It could be dangerous," warned Veltar. "Ancient ships sometimes have active defense systems." "Everything worth doing is dangerous," said Do-hyun, already heading toward the equipment lockers. "Mi-young, get the portable scanners and the emergency power units. We're going to need them." As the renewal moved closer to the derelict, Do-hyun felt something he couldn't explain. The dead ship seemed to be waiting for them. Its empty windows looked like closed eyes, and the energy pattern grew slightly stronger as they approached. "Docking tube sealed," reported Veltar. "Atmosphere is stable in the connection tunnel." Do-hyun put on his environmental suit and checked his tools one final time. Mi-young did the same, her face showing both excitement and worry. "Remember," said Taeho over the communication system, 48 hours. "Check in every 6 hours." "Understood, Captain," replied Do-hyun. "We'll either bring this ship back to life or prove it can't be done." The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Beyond it lay the dark corridors of the eternal dawn, waiting for human hands to work another impossible miracle. Do-hyun stepped forward into the darkness, following the faint energy signature that called to him like a voice from the past. Do-hyun's connection with Luminara changed everything. Through the neural link they had forged, human creativity flowed into alien consciousness while ancient knowledge filled his mind. It was like two rivers meeting and becoming something entirely new. "Show me the ship's schematics," he said, still touching the neural interface. Information flooded his awareness. The Eternal Dawn was more than just a warship. It was a mobile fortress built with technology that combined biological growth with quantum mechanics. Every system was interconnected through living neural networks that could adapt and evolve. "Your weapon systems," said Do-hyun, studying the data flowing through his mind. "They're designed to work with Altarian bioneural interfaces. But what if we modified them to work with human intuition instead?" Luminara's consciousness touched his thoughts. "Explain. Human pilots don't think like Altarians. We don't calculate every possibility. We feel our way through problems. We make impossible shots by instinct." Mi-young watched nervously as Do-hyun communicated with the alien AI. His eyes were closed, but his hands moved constantly over the crystalline interface. Sometimes he spoke aloud, sometimes he was silent. She could only imagine what was happening in his mind. Through their connection, Do-hyun and Luminara began redesigning the ship's systems. They combined Altarian bioneural processing with human intuitive responses. Weapon targeting systems that could feel their way to targets instead of calculating trajectories. Shield generators that could sense incoming attacks before sensors detected them. "This should not be possible," said Luminara with wonder. "Our technologies are completely incompatible. Everything we're doing should be impossible," replied Do-hyun. "That's what makes it work." The modifications required them to rebuild fundamental systems while the enemy fleet approached. Automated repair drones activated throughout the ship, guided by Luminara's consciousness and Do-hyun's mechanical intuition. They welded human components to alien machinery, creating hybrid systems that had never existed before. Captain Taeho watched from the renewal as the dead dreadnought came alive around them. Weapon turrets moved smoothly on their mounts. Shield generators hummed with new energy. The quantum core blazed with power that made their salvage ship's engines look like candles. "Captain," called Veltar from his station, "the energy readings from that ship are beyond anything in our databases." "What are they doing over there?" "Something impossible," replied Taeho with a smile. "Like humans always do." Inside the Eternal Dawn, Do-hyun and Luminara worked as one mind in two bodies. His hands performed delicate repairs while her consciousness coordinated thousands of repair systems. They rebuilt weapon arrays, restored damaged hull sections, and created new types of technology that neither species had imagined. "The primary weapons are online," reported Luminara, "but we face a serious problem." "What's that?" "I have the processing power to coordinate complex battles, but I lack tactical creativity. My programming is logical and predictable. The enemy will anticipate my strategies." Do-hyun grinned. "That's where human unpredictability comes in. Can you give me direct control of the weapon systems?" "The neural interface required would be dangerous for a human mind. More dangerous than letting the hegemony win." Luminara was quiet for a moment. "No, but if we create this connection, it will be permanent. You will become part of this ship forever." Do-hyun looked at Mi-young, who had been listening to their conversation. Her face showed fear and sadness, but also understanding. "Do it," she said. "The galaxy needs what you two can create together." The neural connection deepened until Do-hyun could feel every system on the ship, as if it were part of his own body. He sensed the quantum drive's heartbeat, felt the weapon arrays like extended limbs, and experienced the ship's sensors as new organs of perception. "The enemy fleet is 2 hours away," announced Luminara through the ship's communication system. 12 heavy cruisers with modern weapon systems and advanced shields. Do-hyun, now permanently linked to the ship's consciousness, began implementing strategies that pure logic would never consider. He programmed weapon systems to fire in patterns that felt right, rather than calculating optimal trajectories. He configured shields to move like living creatures flowing around incoming attacks. "This is insane," said Mi-young, watching the modifications take place. "You're making the ship fight like a human instead of a machine." "Exactly," replied Do-hyun. His voice now came from the ship's speakers as well as his own mouth. "Machines are predictable. Humans are not." The transformation accelerated as the enemy approached. Repair systems worked frantically to restore damaged sections. Weapon arrays reconfigured themselves based on intuitive targeting algorithms. The Eternal Dawn became something new, part Altarian bio-neural network, part human creativity, part pure stubborn refusal to accept defeat. 1 hour until contact, reported Luminara. Do-hyun could feel the approaching ships through the vessel's long-range sensors. 12 modern warships with crews trained for conventional warfare. They expected to face either a fully restored Altarian dreadnought or a helpless derelict. They had no idea what was actually waiting for them. "There's something else," said Luminara quietly. "The artifact my crew died protecting. It's not what you think it is. What is it?" "A consciousness. The preserved mind of my original captain, Kyalthera. She was the greatest tactical genius of our species. The hegemony wanted to capture her knowledge." Do-hyun felt a chill of understanding. Can she be awakened? The process was never completed. She exists in a state between life and death, aware but unable to act. What would happen if we integrated her consciousness into our neural network? We would have 3 minds working as one. Human creativity, Altarian processing power, and tactical genius that has never been equaled. The risk? Unknown. No consciousness has ever been split 3 ways. We might all be destroyed. Do-hyun thought of the approaching enemy fleet. 12 ships against 1. The odds were impossible by any reasonable calculation. But reason had never been humanity's strong point. "Do it," he said. The process began as the enemy fleet dropped out of hyperspace. Deep within the ship's core, preservation systems that had protected Kyalthera's consciousness for over a century began the awakening sequence. Ancient neural pathways reconnected. Memories spanning millennia integrated with the hybrid human-Altarian network, and suddenly Do-hyun was no longer alone in his mind. Luminara's vast consciousness joined with the tactical genius of the greatest Altarian commander who had ever lived. 3 minds became one, sharing knowledge, creativity, and purpose. "Enemy fleet in weapons range," announced Kyalthera through their shared consciousness. Her tactical analysis flowed through Do-hyun's awareness like water. 12 heavy cruisers, standard hegemony formation. They expect either easy victory or conventional resistance. "They're about to learn that humans don't believe in conventional," replied Do-hyun. The Eternal Dawn turned to face its enemies, no longer a dead relic but something entirely new. A fusion of species and consciousness that had never existed before. And as the first enemy weapons fired, it began to fight in ways that no military manual had ever described.